If screen time in your house feels like negotiations, tears, or absolute chaos, this video is for you. Screen time doesn't have to be about yelling or power struggles, and in this video I'm going to explore 3 strategies to make your kids feel safe, heard, and cooperative around screens. And this isn't about stricter rules or taking screens away. These strategies work because they look to reduce stress in your child's brain and not because they're focused on increasing control or power from the parent. And by the end of this video, you'll know how to set boundaries that your child actually accepts, how to end screen time without a meltdown, to go from constant battles to calmer transitions, even if screen time has been a constant battle in your home. And stick around because the 3rd strategy is the strategy that most parents skip, but it's definitely the most effective. And before I dive into the strategies, I think it's important to take a step back and understand why screen time impacts our little ones so much and why it causes so many meltdowns and power struggles between both the child and the parent. So we need to remember that screen time stimulates the brain's dopamine reward system, which essentially is the same system involved in motivation, novelty, and habit formation. Fast-paced content, bright colors, and rapid scene changes create high spikes in dopamine, especially in young brains that are still developing impulse control. So essentially what happens with screen time, especially when we're talking about screen time with devices and tablets that have got high dopamine-inducing content, when we look at apps that focus on constant reward systems, when we talk about YouTube content that is an algorithm served system where your child is served the most highly addictive content, the content that the algorithm knows it wants to watch. Essentially what's going on is that the dopamine spikes and drops quickly, the nervous system then shifts into stress mode. The child's prefrontal cortex, which essentially is responsible for logic, reasoning, and self-control, goes offline. And then the amygdala, which is responsible for emotion and threat detection, takes over. So what looks like bad behavior is often a neurological stress response, not defiance. That's why how we set boundaries with kids is more important than the boundary itself. So when we're thinking about healthy screen time for kids, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends no screen time at all for kids aged between 18 and 24 months. And when we look at kids a little bit older, 2 to 5 years, essentially they want around 1 hour per day and no more, and it's high quality content that they need, not this fast-paced, loud, bright colors, dopamine inducing content that we're served every single day on YouTube. Strategy 1, and that's set predictable boundaries. Now this one is absolutely huge, and this is the #1 winner for my wife and I when it comes to screen time with our kids. So if I share some personal insights as to how we set boundaries with our kids, essentially there's no devices at all really, so devices as in tablets at home. We allow devices for longer journeys, usually around an hour. And because that's a very clear and consistent boundary, when we go on a journey, our 7-year-old will ask, is the journey more than an hour? And if it isn't, he understands that there's no device. And if it is, he's, oh, okay, I'll get to go on my iPad this journey. And it's a very clear boundary. And even works really well with our 3-year-old. So our 3-year-old watches the iPad, pre-downloaded content on the iPad for longer journeys. And we were on a journey recently back from my father-in-law's. She watched the iPad and I accidentally left it in the car. So the following day we went in the car and her iPad was sat in her car seat. So we jumped in the car and I thought to myself, ooh, maybe she's going to want to go on the iPad. Maybe there's going to be a meltdown. And she looked at me and said, long journey? And I said, no, we'd just pop into the shop. And I took the iPad, I popped it onto the floor and she got in the car seat and it was absolutely fine. Now, that is a testament to a clear and consistent boundary. Now, our 7-year-old has a Nintendo Switch. The boundary with the Nintendo Switch is he's allowed to play it on weekends if he wishes. And again, that makes the conversation in the week much easier. Now, sometimes my wife and I might drop the boundary if it's a Friday and it's raining outside and we just want to hunker down and chill. We might allow him to go on it on a Friday. But what that does is it goes against my advice and it skews that boundary and it makes it a little bit more confusing. But it's another conversation when we talk about the TV, because obviously the TV is always present. It's on a lot more than devices. Sometimes we put it on in the morning, sometimes when the kids come home from school, throughout the weekend, it might be on in the background. And then that's when the boundaries become less stringent within our home. And I'd say the TV, more than the devices, cause the meltdowns when it's time to go off. It isn't often, but sometimes we might turn the TV off at say 5 p.m. before we have dinner and before bed. Sometimes my wife and I might decide to leave it on a little bit longer if we're watching a film. And obviously, and this is just confirming real life for most people, but what you'll find is that's then where the power struggles come in, because there's no clear and consistent boundary really in our home around the TV. However, if my wife and I had the energy and took the time to introduce boundaries around the TV, then navigating the TV might become much less stressful. However, above all, when we talk about devices and screen times in our home specifically, I'd say we get those power struggles around the TV, and that is why, because we don't have clear and consistent boundaries around the TV. So I was actually talking to a friend of mine recently, and I'm actually going to get him on an episode of the podcast, which I'll share here on YouTube, and him and his partner took their TV out of the home 2 years ago, and they've navigated perfectly fine without any TV for their 2 kids for over 2 years. So I'm really keen to chat to him about this, because obviously there's no need for a boundary because there's no telly, there's no power struggle. I think he said there was a 2-week transition. However, now it's just the new normal. So I'm really keen to get into that with him on an episode of the podcast. So if we dive into the science of boundaries, children's brains seek predictability for safety. Essentially, when routines are consistent, the brain doesn't need to stay in a heightened state of alert. Research from the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University shows that predictable environments support executive function, emotional regulation, and reduced cortisol levels. Unpredictable rules keeps the brain on edge, which makes transitions much harder for our little ones. So when the screen time is predictable, the child's brain prepares for the ending instead of being shocked by it when the parent introduces the boundary. You can do this 2 ways. You can have a very clear boundary as to how the devices and the screen times are used specifically in your home, or you can introduce them on a sort of a day-by-day basis or a segment of the day-by-day basis. So let's say instead of you've got 10 minutes left, there's a clear boundary that could be something like screens are after lunch but before we go outside, or as we do in our home, devices are for longer journeys. Now I get that's an extreme boundary, however that doesn't mean we don't have screens in the home, it's just devices specifically, such as iPads, that we allow on longer journeys. And again, if you're deep in screen time with your little ones and you're trying to wean them, then you're going to need to take some time to set these boundaries and allow your child time to transition, but stick with it, stay clear, stay consistent, and in time they'll get used to those boundaries and they'll be much more compliant when you set those boundaries. And also, this isn't to say that the meltdowns and tantrums stop immediately, but when you've got that boundary in place, then it makes the transition or that emotional stress response much less intense. So this predictability reduces the emotional load, and kids don't have to fight to hold on to the screens because the ending was expected. If you need extra support in this, I've got a happier screen time checklist in the description below. Click that link and you can grab it absolutely free. Strategy 2, and that is choices. So you may or may not be aware of the self-determination theory, which is basically humans are far more cooperative when 3 needs are met. Autonomy, so giving kids some control, competence, and connection. So when kids feel powerless, the brain interprets that as a threat, triggering resistance and opening up the door for that power struggle. However, when guided choices or bounded choices are offered, it helps keep the adult in control whilst also meeting your child's needs for that agency. So you're proactively coming to the table with some choices for your child. So you're giving them some choices that you've come up with. So you're maintaining that control, you're in charge. However, your child then takes on that autonomy and is able to make that choice based on the guides that you've provided. And when we respond to our child in this way, it keeps that prefrontal cortex engaged, which reduces the frequency of those emotional stress responses. So let's give an example. Instead of "turn it off now," you could say something like, "Do you want to turn it off, or shall I turn it off?" Both lead to the same outcome, but your child feels respected rather than overpowered. And of course, they might push back, but you've set the boundary, you've been clear with what the expectation is. So if they do push back, you can then open the door to following through on that boundary and saying something like, "I've given you the opportunity to turn it off. If you're unable to turn it off, then Dad is going to turn it off." And then obviously when you follow through with that, when you turn it off, there might be a power struggle, that's absolutely fine. But over time, that meltdown will become less intense because you have provided the opportunity for them to take control. Even though they might not come across that they are aware, they're aware that if they don't turn it off, then you're going to turn it off. They have the choice to do it themselves, but if not, you're going to step in and turn it off. Another example could be offering a choice when it comes to transitioning. When you turn off the TV, do you want a snack, or should we go and play outside? Now, you're not negotiating whether the TV turns off. The TV goes off in both scenarios, but you're offering the child a choice. You're giving them an alternative for when they turn off the TV. Do I turn off the TV, then go and grab a snack, or should I turn off the TV and go and play outside? The choice is there. So of course that reduces the power struggle and the child isn't being defensive over their autonomy. If you're finding value in this video, if it's helping you reframe screen time, please be sure to hit like so you get served more of these videos and more parents will get served this video if they need to see it. Number 3, and this is one that many parents forget, including myself, because often, whether we like to admit it or not, sometimes when we do have screen time, it is because as parents, maybe we need to get something done around the house, or maybe we just need 5 minutes to get some headspace. And that is strategy number 3, which is co-viewing, which turns screens from dopamine hits into connection. And actually, studies have shown that co-viewing improves language development, helps children process emotional content that they're watching, and reduces that passive consumption. So essentially, when a parent is present, the screen experience shifts from dopamine-driven stimulation to relational learning, which is critical because the brain learns best in connection rather than isolation. So if you think a child has their iPad, they're sat in their room, they're sat on their own, maybe they've got headphones on, they're completely consumed in a passive way by what they're watching. The parent often has no idea the content they're getting served. You can feel the dopamine inducing, maybe you can feel your child getting stressed as they're watching the device. Overall, it's just a poor quality experience for your child. Whereas if you're sat with your child, maybe you're having a movie night, watching the TV, I get this isn't realistic all of the time, but couple that in with healthy boundaries, the viewing experience within your home becomes much happier and much healthier. So when you watch TV together, naturally you're going to engage with what you see, you're going to narrate, you're going to reflect, you're going to say things like, "That character looks frustrated. What do you think?" Or, "What do you think they're up to? What could they do next?" So this activates the child's thinking brain instead of keeping them in passive mode, waiting for that next dopamine hit. When screens are relational, kids are far less dysregulated when that screen time comes to an end, because connection continues after the screen goes off. Maybe you continue talking about what happened. Maybe you've watched a Disney film and you talk about the beast and how he feels when he's turned into a beast or when he falls in love with Belle. It becomes an experience, a new experience in itself. So if you're going to take one thing away from this video, remember that during screen times, more often than not, meltdowns and that stress response occurs during the transition rather than the screen time itself. And research has shown that children transition far better when the next activity is predictable, the next activity is engaging, or the child knows what comes after the screen. So another key takeaway from this video is that screen time doesn't have to be surrounded in this fear. Speaking to parents, I know that sometimes they're a little bit apprehensive about the iPad, about the device, about the screen, because they know when it goes on, they're going to struggle to pull their child away and move on to the next thing. But I really hope with these strategies, starting with clear and consistent boundaries, focus on boundaries based on the device itself, but boundaries based on when they can watch that device. So other examples of clear boundaries is obviously no devices in the bedroom. Always be around an adult when you're using a device. Maybe you'll want to do something that we've done and said, no devices at home. They're just for longer journeys. That might be extreme in your mind right now because your child might be dependent on the iPad, but keep clear and consistent and they will understand and you will transition to that new normal. Layer in that agency, give your child that element of control, very important. And then also finally, focusing on when you can, co-viewing, turning that passive screen time into a relational, enjoyable experience with your child. If you're looking for more on this, be sure to grab the free Healthier Screen Time checklist in the description below. You can click the video above to learn about ways that YouTube can hijack your child's brain. And if you want more of these videos, be sure to hit like and subscribe so YouTube knows and they'll serve more of my videos to you. Thanks for watching.